Hey, what's up, guys? You know what time it is. We're back. Tier list is here. New Capenna's here. So we're going to rate all the new commanders. As usual, I'm going to go through the ranking real quick just so we're all on the same page. S is the best of the best. It's the best designed commanders. They're very balanced, very fun, and good for the format. A, very good commanders. You know, may have one or two holdups from making them great. But not quite the best in the format. For the format. B, just good, solid commanders. You'll see them here and there. But you know, they have some holes, but they also have some play to them. C is kind of below average design commanders. They're missing key pieces, or maybe there's not enough support for the strategy that they're trying to pull off, and so on. And then D is finally reserved for cards that I think are just actively bad for the format. Cards that are just way too good and, just probably shouldn't have been printed in the way that they are. So yeah, that's how I'm doing my ratings. This is not necessarily a power ranking rating. This power will be taken into consideration, but this is more of, if you sit across from the table and somebody's playing this deck, or do they have, some ways that they can go with building the deck, and are you going to have a good experience as well playing against it? Yeah, so let's get started. First off, we're going to start from the commander deck commanders and the set booster commanders. So basically the commander set part of New Capenna. We're going to start with one of the face commanders, and Halo, the painter. He's a Grixis, so blue, black, and red, for a 1/3 with Death Touch. The first instant or sorcery cast each turn has Casualty 2. This card is very good. It's an annoying blocker when you really need it to be. It has a very open build around. It just asks you to cast spells, and then you get a casualty to them. But notably, it's not casualty 1, so you can't just sack anything. Casualty 2 is somewhat of a restriction. You do actually have to sack somewhat of a real creature. But the cool thing about this deck is it asks you to have fodder, so that way you're not only casting ridiculous spells and getting just doubles for free. So you have to be able to produce tokens or whatever pretty consistently, and then you also have to give them up to make your spell even better. But yeah, this card is very sweet. The build around is super worth it. Yeah, just seems like a pretty easy A for me. I'm pretty happy with the design of this commander. Next up, we got Henzi Toolbox Tour. I assume that's how you say it. Red, black, and green for a 3/3. Each spell you cast with mana value 4 or greater has Blitz. The Blitz cost is equal to its mana cost. Blitz costs you pay cost 1 less to catch for each time you've cast your commander from the command zone. So this card, obviously the first time you play it, it automatically reduces the cost by 1 for the blitzes. Blitzing, just giving blitz to creatures, especially at a reduced rate, is very, very powerful. Notably, this does limit it to to mana value 4 or greater, so you're only gonna blitz real creatures. You can't blitz a mana dork, get the mana from it because it has haste, and then sack at the end of the turn to cash in a card or something. So it doesn't let you cycle cards in that way. However, I don't think this card does kind of do almost everything for you. It helps you cast your spells. It draws you cards. Notably, the way that it draws you cards, though, is that you don't get to keep your thing. So there's a little bit of a buffer on it. But yeah, I think there's enough, kind of play here where this card isn't just insane by itself, because this creature does have to sit on the battlefield, and it doesn't really do anything. Like, it's not a threat itself or anything. And then you still have to pay additional mana to get your kind of payoff, because this isn't Eminence. It doesn't just do this all the time. You don't just have this effect. This creature has to be on the battlefield for you to have this powerful effect. So for those reasons, I think this is a pretty well-designed commander. I think it's a little bit more open-ended than my liking. and kind of in a more powerful way than in Halo. So I think I'm gonna land it in the B category. It's a strong B though. It's up there in B. I'm fairly happy with the design of that card. Next up, we have Kamiz, Obscura Oculus. It's 1 white, blue, black for a 2/4. Notably, it's a Cephalid, which is really sweet. We have Cephalids back. When you attack, target attacking creature can't be blocked this turn. It connives. Then choose another attacking creature with lesser power. That creature gains double strike until end of turn. This card is very weird. The direction on it is somewhat open-ended, but also kind of not. It wants you to attack with multiple creatures in Esper, which is not traditionally an Esper strategy, but it does give you a pretty nice payoff. The making a creature unblockable and conniving is quite strong, and then giving another creature with lesser power double strike. That ability is kind of meh to me. I'm much more excited about the first half of this ability. The nice thing, though, is the second creature that you're attacking with, being double strike is pretty annoying to block. And since it has to be a creature with lesser power, your opponents probably won't be too mad when you swing that one into one of them who's open to, trigger your first ability, which is the part you actually care about. This card is kind of a weird puzzle, for sure. And I like that. And it, gives you a lot of play here. It just asks you to, attack with creatures. So, if you want to reliably, keep the thing that you want to give unblockable alive, you can play an actual unblockable creature. So, for example, you have like something you want to get in, like something with infect or whatever. It's not a great attacker on its own. Then you can play, like an invisible stalker or something. And then you give the creature, then you attack with both. You give the creature that you want to get in unblockable. And then you give the invisible stalker just double strike just because, it allows them both to get in for free without having to, risk one of your creatures in combat. So there's definitely some cool play with this card. The actual card itself doesn't excite me. And this is not really a strategy that I foresee myself building or want to build. But I think people can definitely make some cool things around it, and I think it's a worthwhile commander playing around. So I'm happy with a B on this one. Next up, Kit Kanto, Mayhem Diva, 1 generic red, green, white, so 4 mana for a 3/3. When enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 citizen. At the beginning of combat on each player's turn, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control. When you do, target creature that player controls gets +2/+2 and gains trample until end of turn. Goad that creature. So this card on its own can trigger its own ability thanks to it coming with another creature, being the citizen. I think this card is fine. This card doesn't really have much of a build around. It just kind of does a thing. The thing is cool, like goading your opponent's creature, giving it trample, and making it bigger can be very annoying for your other opponents, but it doesn't really progress a game plan for you other than helping your opponents kill each other. So this card's like fine. I don't think there's as much play here as like Kamiz was, so I don't think I'm willing to give this a B grade. Goad is fun, but like you don't like playing Goad Tribal or something is a little bit much. Like once you goad everything with like a Disrupt Decorum, then like who cares about goading the things even more, And since you have goad in the command zone, you don't really need to put like goad in your deck. I mean, if you go wide, I guess you can goad something on each of your opponent's turns. Or if you have like a Seedborn Muse or something, like those are like cute effects, but like they don't really do much of anything. And it's just not something that excites me. I think I'm just gonna put this in C and move on. Next up, Perry the Pulverizer. Funny name. 1 generic green, white, blue, so 4 mana for a 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, you put a shield counter on target creature you control. When it attacks target creature you control, gains trample and +X until end of turn, where X is the number of different kinds of counters among permanents you control. Okay. This card is interesting for sure. It comes with a counter on its own, so it can already turn on its own ability. Notably, the trigger for its attacks is when it attacks and not just when you attack, which is a distinction that is important to make now, because we've been getting a lot of things that just say when you attack, so that way you get that effect the turn your creature comes into play. While parry, you have to wait a turn to give this haste, so and these colors are not very good at giving haste. So then you have to play some cards that may not synergize with your deck, like Swiftfoot Boots, Lightning Greaves, Crashing Drawbridge, those sort of cards, which feels kind of bad, but may be necessary for this deck. But the effect is pretty cool. Different kinds of counters is interesting. So you're going to be looking at like your Ikoria cards, giving like trample counters, lifelink counters, double strike counters, whatever. And there's some cool new tools from the new set for this card. So I like this card. It seems like a very fine design. The payoff is worth it for having multiple different kinds of tokens, different kinds of counters. I mean, but this strategy is kind of an all-in strategy. At least you get the shield counter to kind of help you protect on your all-in strategy. But I think this card's fine. I'm gonna put this in a B. Next card, the Beamtown Bullies. 1 red, green, black for a 4/4 with vigilance and haste. Target opponent whose turn it is puts target non-legendary creature card from your graveyard onto the battlefield under their control. It gains haste. Goad it. At the beginning of the next end step, exile it. Okay, so that was quite a sentence and an ability. This card is a bit too insane. Not because of this card itself, but just because of other cards that exist that are just begging to go into this deck. This card on its face is like a super awesome design. I really like what this card does. This card is very unique. I mean, we've never seen anything like this. It even has some cool play where you can blow up the creature that you give them with like a Despotic Scepter or just to go for the throat or whatever. And then the creature will go back into your graveyard and won't get exiled. The main problem with this card is it just comes down to is this just has haste. If this just didn't have haste and you had to like work around this card a little bit more, like this card, because this card has haste, this card requires almost no setup to just kill your opponent out of nowhere. You just put like a leveler or like a Eater of Days or something that basically makes them lose the game into your graveyard, like the turn before you play this card. And then you play this card and you say go. And then as soon as it becomes your next, as soon as it cycles around the table, each one of your opponents is threatened to die if they do anything too scary. Because this thing just has haste for some reason. Like I said, I really like this card on its face. I really like the design that it has. But you can just never let your opponent play with this card, right? Like, the turn that they play it, you just have to hold up interaction the whole game. Any turn that they play this card, you have to have interaction held up. Because they will just kill you on your turn. So, yeah. For that reason, I think this card's pretty lame. I mean, you can... It's hard to say that you can see it coming, because you could argue like that, you know, they might bury it alive, put some creatures that will kill their opponents in their graveyard, and then you're like, okay, next turn they're gonna play Beamtown Bullies and then kill somebody, and then I'll just kill it before my turn starts. But like, they could very easily just like play this out, and then like during your turn they could entomb something at instant speed and then kill you. This card's just a bit. I'm trying to decide where I want to fall with this card, because I think this card on its face is really sweet, but like, just other cards in the game just make this card miserable. And the cards that make this card miserable are not like cards that are ban worthy or anything like that. And this card is probably not ban worthy, but it is very, very obnoxious. I think I just have to put this in D. With all things considered. The problem with this card is it just has haste. If you had just do the extra little hoop of giving this thing haste somehow, then I think it's like fine. It's still like obnoxious, like your opponent still could kill you out of nowhere, but like a lot of things can kill you out of nowhere with haste, right? So yeah, I think that's just the main problem with this card. Yeah. Really, really cool card, but other cards of Magic's history make this card just not okay. Next up, Kroos, Defense Contractor. 1 green, white, blue for a 2/4. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a shield counter on target creature and opponent controls. Whenever you put one or more counters on a creature you don't control, tap that creature and goad it. It gains trample until your next turn. Another goad card, I guess. This card is like fine. It asks you to do a very weird thing, which is put counters on your opponent's creatures, but the payoff is like very little to like nothing. Like, especially since this makes you put the shield counter on a creature your opponents control. There's not an option here, which is really annoying. Like, most cards like this usually give you the option, but for some reason this one just makes you do it. And you're pretty disincentivized to like keep putting... If you keep goading the same creature, one big threat, then you're not putting like more like... Then you're just protecting it even more, and it's making it even harder to kill. So if there's like one big threat that you keep goading, and you're gonna put like a million shield counters on it, then like when you run out of opponents, like then you have to face down this threat that has a billion shield counters on it. Like, this card's just so weird. I don't really like understand like why this card the way that it is. There's not much payoff here. There's not even a lot of juice to squeeze out of this card. I think this card's just a C. It's just pretty boring. And it's just a weird design. Next up, Pernice, the Subtle Brush. 2 blue, black, red for a 4/4. Whenever you or a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter that spell or ability unless that player pays 4 life. So everything you have is ward pay 4 life. Okay? Whenever you copy a spell, up to one target opponent may also copy that spell. They may choose new targets for the copy. So this card's actually pretty cool. So unlike the last card, which didn't give you the option, this one does give you the option. And it disincentivizes your opponents to mess with this or anything you have with, the spells that you give them or, anything else. I mean, obviously you probably won't give them a spell unless they tell you what they're going to do with it. So I really like the design of this card. I think it's pretty sweet. This card isn't really like an engine of any kind, but it does have a pretty cool build around, and it will lead to pretty fun gameplay. So yeah, I just like this card. I think it's a cool design. It's open-ended enough, but it also, gives you a pretty cool payoff, and it leads to some pretty fun gameplay. So I think I'm at top of B with this one. I don't think I'm quite into A with this one. But it'll lead to some pretty fun experiences for sure. Next up, we have Fabine, Boss is Confident. This is a 3/6 for 3 red, white, green. 6 mana for a 3/6. Creature tokens you control have haste. Okay. Parlay. At the beginning of combat on your turn, each player reveals the top card of their library. For each land revealed this way, you make a citizen. Then creatures get +1/+1 until end of turn for each non-land revealed this way, and then you all put the revealed cards into your hand by drawing them. This card's cool. The mana cost on this card is definitely too high compared to the other cards that we've been looking at. Like all the face commanders of all the precons were like 3 or 4 mana. 6 mana is a lot to ask. Notably, it does replace itself in the form of Parlay the turn you play it when you go to combat. You give your opponent some cards, but like, I mean, obviously that's a downside, but like, whatever. You're probably going to make like, what? On average, you'll make 1, maybe 2 citizens, and your creatures are going to get +2/+2. But the tokens that you make have haste, so even though you pump them immediately, then they can attack. This asks you this gives you a reasonable payoff for playing this card by, some slow but consistent card draw, including a card the turn that you play this. The main draw here is you want to go wide with other tokens. So you want to be playing your Secure the Waste and stuff. And then what you really want is to hit this second ability multiple times by pumping your whole board that, will have haste and such. This card's pretty cool, I think. It's, the power level is, like, kind of low. But, like, once again, that's fine. As long as the card's cool and fun to play and play against, then that's kind of my main thing. So I think I'm bottom of B. It's borderline C for me, but I think I'm at bottom of B. It's pretty fun and open-ended, but not insanely open-ended. And it, will give you reasonable payoff. So, yeah, without being insane. So I'm happy with this card. Tivit, Seller of Secrets. 3 white, blue, black for a 6/6 with flying and ward 3. This card is Council's Dilemma. Boy, that's a ability I haven't heard in a while. When Tivit enters the battlefield or deals combat damage to a player, starting with you, each player votes for evidence or bribery. Evidence gets you a treasure. Bribery gets you or evidence gives you a clue. Bribery gives you a treasure. While voting, you may vote an additional time. So this card, this card basically is one thing, right? When this enters, you're gonna get 3 clues and 2 treasures, because all your opponents should vote for clue and you should vote for treasure. And then it also does it when it hits somebody, which is cool. Ward 3 is very annoying. It is. That is actually a cost that is annoying to pay. And then the while voting cast to vote an additional time is obviously the really cool part of this card. But unfortunately, we didn't get any at all new voting cards in the precons, which usually when they make you precon commanders, like usually they give you a couple cards to support the secondary commander just to, like, give you some extra tools, because usually the secondary commander is a little bit more narrow. But they just didn't give us anything to support this card in the precon. So you just are relying on old voting cards. And there are a few cool ones, but like they just don't get, there's just not enough tools for this card yet, which is really unfortunate, because this card is really cool. But yeah, I think since it just doesn't have the tools it needs to play, it just lands in C for me. I'm going to give it like top of C though. This card definitely has room to move up if we get more voting cards, but it seems unlikely that we will, unless we get them in a few in like Commander Legends too. But it even that seems kind of unlikely. So yeah, unfortunately this card's just a C. A really cool C, but it's unlikely to get new tools. It really needed to get a few, at least in the precon, but it didn't get any, so it's unfortunate. Next, Bess, Soul Nourisher. 1 green-white for a 1/1. Whenever one or more other creatures with base power and toughness 1/1 enter the battlefield under your control, you put a 1/1 counter on Bess. Whenever Bess attacks, each other creature you control with base power and toughness 1/1 gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of +1 counters on Bess. There's a couple of problems with this card. One, it doesn't trigger on itself. So this is a 3-mana 1/1. Second, it's 1 or more, so you don't get multiple counters when you make a slew of 1/1 tokens. And then 3, the pump ability is when this attacks, and it only gives +1. It only gets +X and no evasion, based on the number of 1/1 counters on Bess, not her power. So her 1/1 on its face doesn't do anything. You got to put counters on this thing, then you got to attack with this thing, and then it only pumps your 1/1s, specifically your 1/1s, so your citizens and stuff. This card just sucks. There's not much to do here. The one cute thing you can do is like layer attacks triggers, so that way you're attacking in with the 1/1s, and then they trigger all these effects. So you do this in like Pathbreaker Ibex and things like that. So that way they're seen as 1/1s until they are attacking. But yeah, there's just not enough play to this card, and it just doesn't do enough. And this card's just boring. It's just an easy D. Next, Denry Klin, Editor-in-Chief. Very weird name. 2 white blue for 2/2. When this enters the battlefield with your choice of a 1/1 counter, a first strike counter, or a vigilance counter, okay. Whenever a non-token creature you control enters the battlefield, if Denry has counters on it, put the same number and kinds of counters on that creature. Okay, that's a pretty cool ability. The counters that it can enter with are not great. The +1 counter is obviously the best. Vigilance is like pretty bad. First strike is like fine. First strike at least makes you you can easily amass a board of very annoying blockers. If your whole board is first strike, it's like impossible to attack into you. Notably, it says non-tokens, so you can't make an army of like tokens with +1 counters on them. But that's, I think, a fine restriction to make on this card. Because this card, once again, wants you to play with the keyword counters from Ikoria. But this does it very, very well. I think it does it better than Parry does. Because it, it spreads the love out. It's not nearly as all in of a strategy. You are in one reduced color, being green. And green did have quite a few keyword counters on it. So the build around for this card is definitely a lot higher than Parry. It asks more of you in the build, but I like that personally. I mean, y'all know me, I'm a deck builder, so I like having to jump through some hoops and trying to get more out of a card than the card just giving me everything. But I think there's enough here for sure. The payoff is definitely worth it. Making all your creatures come in with a bunch of counters will make all of your creatures threats very easily. The one downside of this card, which I think can be a good thing in terms of the design, is this card doesn't protect itself. So if like shield counter was one of these, it would be a nightmare. Because this could enter with a shield counter, and then all your things you play after it enter with shield counters, and then it's just really hard to deal with. So, I like Denry a lot. I think this easily deserves a B. I don't think I'm quite on A with this card, but I think this card is really sweet. I think the design's good. I think the payoff's good. It's very interactable, but the juice is worth the squeeze on this one for sure. Next up, Jolene the Plunder Queen, 2 red-green for a 2/2. Whenever a player attacks one or more of your opponents, that attacking player creates a treasure token. If you would create one or more treasure tokens, instead create those tokens plus an additional treasure token. Sacrifice 5 treasures. Put 5 1/1 counters on Jolene. So the main ability we're interested in here is obviously the second one. Being kind of a Zorn in the command zone is kind of nice. Plus you get you can play Zorn in the deck obviously, and then you also get access to green treasure cards, which we've for some reason got a notable number of recently in this set and otherwise. Notably, the whenever a player attacks one or more of your opponents triggers for everybody, so you will have to give out some treasure with this card, but presumably you will get 2 treasures back right after playing this card, because the play pattern should be you play a creature on 2 or 3 or whatever, and then the turn after you play Jolene, and then you attack with that creature, and then you get 2 counters. The one nice thing about the first ability also is that it doesn't trigger when they attack you. So it at least makes it a little... If they want to attack you and get value from the treasures, they at least have to have a couple creatures that are threats and aren't just going to be throwaways in combat. So the attacks for your opponents aren't like free here on you. And this card can become a threat if you run out of things to do with your treasures. Like you don't... Because you will make a lot of treasures in this deck. Having a Zorn in the command zone will do that. Sacrificing 5 treasures to put 5 1/1 counters on Jolene is a totally fine fallback. It can act a little bit as protection as well. But typically damage removal is not like very common in Commander. But if your opponent isn't paying attention when they go to Toxic Deluge or something, maybe you can pump this up and keep it alive if you really want to. I think the design of this card's cool. The payoff is here. It is pretty powerful. It is symmetrical, so there is a balance to it. I think this card probably deserves an A. I'm pretty happy with this card. I like what it's doing. And it's fun for your opponents because they can get some treasures from it too. But you will get the most treasures because of its second ability. All that being said, though, Jolene's a cool card. Next up, Oscar, Rubbish Reclaimer. Dude's name is just Oscar, I guess. But it's spelled in a cool way, I guess. 3, blue-black for a 3/3. This spell costs 1 generic less to cast for each different mana value among cards in your graveyard. Whenever you discard a non-land card, you may cast it from your graveyard. This card's pretty sweet. I like this card a lot. This card does reduce its own cost, and it does reduce its commander tax because presumably you will have a myriad of mana values in your graveyard. 0 through 3 specifically seem very easy to reach. CMCs, that is. So this card is probably gonna, cost 2 almost all the time. It doesn't pay for all of the commander tax all the time. Once this thing has died like twice, you probably will have to pay a little extra over 2. Because it seems unlikely that you will have more than 7 different CMCs in your graveyard. But it's not impossible. And if you do, then I guess you earned it for sure. And then, so this commander is basically 2 mana. So what do you get? 2 mana for a 3/3. When you discard a non-land card, you may cast it from your graveyard. That's pretty cool. So one thing that's pretty annoying about a lot of cards that when you discard them, they exile them like Bag of Holding or whatever, is that it's in a replacement effect, and the card never really hits the graveyard. So even though you're playing a discard deck, usually when you're playing a discard deck, you want synergies for the cards in your graveyard. So like when you discard them, they can still do something. You're not just throwing away cards. But like with cards like Bag of Holding and cards similar to it, Grimoire of the Dead, where it helps you discard, but then you have to exile under the book. You're just praying that they don't blow up the thing, because then you lose all those things forever. Oscar is the really nice upside of the card actually goes to your graveyard. So if you don't want to cast it with Oscar's ability, at least you can put it in there and then use it later for something else if you want to. If you can't cast it right then or something. But also it's it's just a fine payoff. It's really open-ended. You can play cards like cycling cards in this deck. You can play madness cards in this deck. You can play, all your normal discard stuff in this deck. And then, incidentally, if you discard something that you'd like to cast, it's pseudo card advantage, but you got to kind of work around it to do it. I think this card's sweet. It's not obscenely powerful, but the build is open-ended enough, but also, points you in a direction. So I'm pretty happy with this card. I think this card probably deserves an A. I like it. Next up, Cyrux, Carrier of the Flame. 2 black-red for a 3/3 with flying and haste. Notably, it's a Phoenix, which will matter. At the beginning of each end step, if a creature card left your graveyard this turn, target Phoenix you control deals damage equal to its power to any target. Whenever another Phoenix you control dies, you may cast Cyrux, Carrier Flame from your graveyard. So most people are pretty happy about this card because it's finally a commander for Phoenix Tribal, because we haven't really had any legendary Phoenixes. I think as Phoenix Tribal though, this card sucks because most Phoenixes, they come back from the graveyard, right? But almost all of them have different restrictions. Some come back when you cast instant and sorceries. Some come back when you deal so much damage. Some come back if you discarded a card this turn. All sorts of just various things. And Cyrux, its ability only triggers, each end step. And most Phoenix abilities cost mana and multiple mana at that 2 to 4 mana. So being able to consistently do this on your opponent's turns is pretty hard. Because it says each end step. So obviously you're probably going to do it during your end step, but then doing it during your opponent's end steps is pretty hard to do. The nice thing, I say the nice thing, but the nice thing is it does let you replay it from your graveyard, so that way you don't have to keep paying commander tax on this. But you have to do it when a Phoenix dies, and then you still have to pay the mana cost of this card. So I mean, I guess this is people can be happy because they finally got a Phoenix tribal commander, but that card, I think that deck's gonna be pretty sad. I think people are gonna be disappointed with how the deck plays once they start putting it together because of the things I've said. So I think I'm not really a tribal player, and Phoenix's is a very underwhelming tribe, and I don't think this card has like that great of a synergy with like pulling all the Phoenixes together, because most of the Phoenixes are all over the place. So I think this card's just a miss. I'm just gonna put this in D. Next up, we have Benny Brack's Zoologist. This one's a doozy. 3 and a white for a 3/2 with Convoke. At the beginning of each end step, if you create a token this turn, draw a card. This card is I don't like this card. My problem with this card is that it asks you to do a strategy, and then when you do the strategy, it rewards you with card draw and discounting this spell. Because notably, the turn you play this, so let's say you turn 2, turn 1 you don't do anything. Turn 2 you cast Raise the Alarm. You make 2/1/1 white creatures. Turn 3 you play your land. You tap your 2/1/1s, and 2 planes or whatever to cast this, and then you cast like a Legion's Landing or something. Make another 1/1. This card will still draw a card even if the token came in before this card entered the battlefield, because it's at each end step, so it checks to see previously it checks at the end step. Oh, did you create a creature token this turn, whether this was here or not? Okay, you draw a card. So I just don't like this. I don't like this card. There's a lot of ways to make instant speed creature tokens, so it's really easy to draw cards off of this. And the fact that this just helps you discount itself when you are already doing the strategy it asks you to do with Convoke. I really don't like the design of this card. That being said, it is mono white, so if you are playing this as your commander, it's not going to be like insanely strong or anything. It is going to be very resilient, however. And yeah, for me, I think the design of this card is kind of too generic for sure. Too generic value. Like when I first looked at Smothering Tithe, I thought it was a cool card. But it was just like, why would it not white? Why? I mean, this is a good tool for like white decks, but every deck's just gonna play this card, right? Not just white decks. And I think this is like pretty much in the same boat. But this one you can put in your command zone. So like every token deck probably from now till the end of time is gonna just play this card. If you're in white, you should. But yeah, I just don't like this card. I think this is just bad design overall. So for that reason, I just think I'm gonna put it in D. Like I said, notably, if you are playing against this card as a commander, it's not gonna like be like some insane, it's not gonna be an insane deck, but it is gonna be resilient and annoying. But whenever you're playing as a token deck from now until the end of time, you're just gonna see this card. Because it doesn't even ask you to make like creature tokens. It just asks if you make a token. So yeah, I think this card's just bad design. It's just really boring to me. Next up, a card with very sweet design. Mary, the Killing Quill. 1 black for a 3/2 vampire assassin. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, exile it with a hit counter. So notably, the creature does die. This is not a replacement effect, so the creature will hit the graveyard and then it will get exiled from this triggered ability. Assassins, mercenaries, and rogues you control have Death Touch, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you may remove a hit counter from a card that player owns in exile. If you do, draw a card and create 2 treasure tokens. This card is pretty sweet. This card is not powerful, but it does give you a home for some pretty cool creature types. If they would have left it at Assassins and Mercenaries, I think this card would still be really sweet. But they had to throw Rogues in there just because they had to give you a super supported tribe, so that way this card would see play and people would be happy with it. They couldn't just give, a niche tribe a cool payoff. They had to throw in the rogues to make it, not as interesting, but whatever. Giving them death touch is cool. A lot of times with cards like this, lately they've been printing attacking whatever creatures have death touch. This just gives them death touch, so it makes them even very good on defense. But it does incentivize you still to attack with them because it wants you to deal combat damage with them. And it's asking you to kind of kill creatures so that way they have hit counters on them. But this card's not like a hate piece because it's not, it's not letting their dice triggers not happen like a rest in peace effect would. They still die and then they get exiled. So this card's not annoying to play against. It's really cool. The creatures, the creatures that you exile don't come back when you remove the hit counters on them. They still stay in exile. They just have a hit counter on them, then you just remove it. And then the payoff is that you get to draw a card and create 2 treasure tokens. And it's for each creature that hits this. A lot of these effects that we've been reading is like 1 or more assassins or whatever deal combat damage, but it gives the creatures the ability when they hit, it triggers. So for each one, you got to do the thing. So overall, this card's just really sweet. The design of this card's cool. It's got a cool build around. It's incentivizes some cool archetypes that we haven't really had a lot of support for in assassins and mercenaries. It's not annoying to play against in the command zone or otherwise. So yeah, this card's just sweet. This card seems like an A to me. Next up, I'm gonna have to skip forward just a bit here. Give me 1 second. For some reason in my file for this, it would refuse to move the last set booster legend into the right sequence of cards. But anyway, here we go. Lastly, for the commander decks commanders, we have Vazzy, Keen Negotiator, 2 black, red, green for a 3/3 with haste. Target opponent creates X treasure tokens, where X is the number of treasure tokens you created this turn. Whenever an opponent casts a spell or activates an ability, if mana from a treasure was spent to cast it or activate it, you put a 1/1 counter on target creature and then draw a card. This card really sucks because this card doesn't help you create treasures in any way. It just gives treasures away. And the payoff of getting a card and a 1/1 counter on something whenever your opponent uses casts a spell or activates an ability with a treasure is just not enough of a payoff to be giving away a ton of free mana. Because they can just spend multiple treasures on one thing and then you still only get 1 card. It doesn't say for each treasure that it doesn't say like when they use a treasure. It just says if mana from a treasure was spent to cast it. So if they spend if they have a 5 mana spell and they spend 5 treasures on it, you get 1/1 counter and 1 card. You don't get 5. So your opponents can very easily play around the free mana that you give them. The payoff is not here. I do really love this card. This card is hilarious, and it is hilariously bad. But because it's so bad, I kind of want to build a deck around it because it's really charming. Like build some sort of deck that's incentivizes your opponents not to use the treasures that you give them, but pays you off for making a bunch of treasures. So you play like Disciple of the Vaults and stuff. So when they sack your treasures or you sack yours, you get to dome them for 1. So yeah, I think this card is very bad. So it's just obviously a D. But I do love this card. This card is actually hilarious because it is bad. All right. So now we're going to move into the main set. We're going to talk about all the cards from regular new Capenna. First up is Giada, Font of Hope. 1 and a white for a 2/2 angel with flying and vigilance. Each other angel you control enters the battlefield with an additional 1/1 counter on it for each angel you already control, so itself. Tap, add white. Spend this mana only to cast an angel spell. I really don't like this card. This card's not like obscene or anything, but I think the design for this card's just very boring. It's just a 2-mana dork for your tribal deck, and then it also pays you off even more by pumping your other angels that come in with 1/1 counters. And this thing can even chip in because it has flying and vigilance. So I don't know. I just don't think this card's very interesting. It's just generically and obviously the best angel commander they have ever printed. because the mana cost is just so low. And, to me, it just seems like this is a story spotlight character. This is one of the main characters of the set, so they had to make this card good, and they really wanted people to play this card in Commander because it's, a centerpiece of the set. So they had to juice it, and juice it they did. Now, the only thing for making this card like just a generic D because it's too powerful is the fact this card doesn't produce any sort of card advantage, because it gives you the mana advantage. It helps you kill your opponents, but it is missing the card draw aspect of it. So I'm not going to give it a D for that. And I think because the card advantage is not here, that I'm not going to, just downgrade it because of its just boring nature. Because this card's, like I said, is not obscene. It's just very good at doing the thing that it does, and kind of obsoletes the other commanders in this archetype. Sort of like Golos did for other 5-color commanders. So yeah, I don't think I'm gonna dock this card too much, but I'm just gonna give it a B, I think. Yeah, I'm just gonna put it bottom of B. Next up, Errant Street Artist. 1 blue mana for a 0/3 with Flash, Defender, and Haste. You can pay 1 and a blue and tap this creature. Copy target spell you control that wasn't cast. You may choose new targets for the copy. Okay, so this card is this card just really got my gears turning of trying. I did a lot of research on this card because I really want to make this card work, because I think this design is really sweet. And it's super it gets the wheels turning. You have to look at all these cards that are copying things, and do they actually cast the copy? Do they not cast the copy? It turns out most things that you copy with nowadays, they cast the copy. So this card doesn't actually have a lot to do as a commander, which is really unfortunate. Some of the few ways that you can do it with are with Jin Cataxius, Curse of Echoes, Echo Storm, Narcissus Reversal, and then it's one of the blue instants that copies a spell on the stack, and you can choose new targets for the copy. It's like Twin Cast or one of those redirect. No, I think it is Twin Cast. But anyway, there's just not enough tools for this card to work right now. Yeah, it's just unfortunate, but this card is so cool. I really want this card to work, and I really want this card to get more tools as a commander. That all being said, this card is fine in the 99 of a Spell Slinger deck, because it'll help trigger all your other most of the copy cards that don't cast are red cards. So yeah, this is a pretty cool card in a red blue Spell Slinger deck. But yeah, I really want this card to work, but I'm gonna put it right here next to Tivit, because it just doesn't have the support that it needs to really be a sweet deck. There are still some really cute things you can do with it, but just not enough. Next up, Jaxus the Troublemaker. 3 generic and a red for a 2/3 with blitz of 1 and a red. Its ability is red, tap, discard a card. Create a token that's a copy of another creature you control. It gains haste, and when this creature dies, draw a card. Sacrifice the ability in the next end step. Activate only as a sorcery. So its first ability basically allows you to blitz a creature. Make a token of a copy of a creature you control that has blitz. Notably, the creature that you blitz on will replace the card that you discard from the first effect, because when that token that you make dies, you replace the card you discarded. This card is so sweet. This card is not obscene in any way. This card is very hard to combo with, it seems, because you have to pay a mana, you have to tap it, and you have to discard. So you'd have to have mana generation, untap, and drawing cards to and colored mana at that to be able to generate an infinite loop. So this card just seems really hard to combo with, and this card is also just really cool. This effect is just very awesome, implementing blitz in this way to cards that you just want to play in your deck. This card also has blitz, so if you're getting late game and you're maybe this card has died once or twice, and you you need to push through that one last turn, then you can blitz at a significantly reduced cost and still do the thing that you want to do, because it'll get haste. So yeah, this card, I don't see any downside to this card. This card is just super cool design. It does a lot without being obscene. It requires you to like already have a board and this thing not have summoning sickness and be able to tap to do the powerful thing that it does, unless you want to like, do it right now, and then you have to take a significant downside of blitzing this and then it getting more commander attacks. And yeah, so this card I think is just an S. This card is just amazing design, super cool card, super fun card, not obscene. Yeah, it just checks all the boxes. Yeah, it's awesome. Jaxus is great. Next up, Urbrask, Heretic Praetor. We got debatably the new worst Urbrask now. 3 red for a 4/4 with haste. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile top card of your library. You may play it this turn. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, the next time they would draw a card this turn, instead they exile the top card of their library, they may play it this turn. So this card is an outpost siege for you, and for your opponents it is a Uba Mask sort of effect, just for the first card that they draw. Because if they don't use it, they lose it. This card is like just fine. I don't foresee this ever being anybody's commander. It's just not interesting enough to like build much of a commander deck around. There's no build around here. And in the 99, it's got like some value, but like this card's just whatever. Me personally, I would probably rather play the older Urbrask over this, because it has a lot more play. Giving all your creatures haste is a good effect, and then making all your opponent's creatures enter tapped is an effect that red has a hard time with. It makes blocking very, very annoying for your opponents. So I think I like older Urbrask better than this card. And I don't think this card is like really that interesting. It's just a fine card. It's just a little bit of generic value and a little bit of annoyance for your opponents on like just a mediocre body. Am I in D on this one? I think I'm on D on this one. This is D mostly because it's like boring, not necessarily because it's bad. There's just nothing to do with this card. Yeah, there's just nothing to do with this card. Next up, Cormela, Glamour Thief. 1 blue, black, red for a 2/4 with haste. Pay 1 and tap. Add blue, black, red to your mana pool. Spend this mana only to cast instant or sorcery spells. And then when this creature dies, you return up to 1 target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. This card's pretty sweet. The only problem with this card is it seems like it would be pretty easy to combo with, right? Like you just need like some sort of sack outlet and then like a way to like, like flicker or untap this, because it just with a spell. Because when this dies, it'll give you back the spell that you used to, flicker it or whatever when you sack it with your sack outlet. Because like spending the mana only to cast instant or sorcery spells is what you're going to be doing. It's not really much of a restriction. And it is colored mana, very importantly, and it's more mana that you put into it than you put into it. So this card is like on its face really sweet, but this card just seems pretty easy to go infinite with. So I think I'm going to dock it a decent amount of points because of that. That being said, you do still have to put the engine together, and this card is pretty interesting just on its face. So I think I'm going to put it in like a B or C. I think I'm okay with putting it in B. Yeah. Next up, Evelyn the Covetous. This is part of the there's a cycle of these cards where they have a hybrid of the 3 color pairs of the 3 color shards, but you could also just pay 1 color mana to cast them. So this one's the 2 generic blue black hybrid, black red hybrid for a 2/5 with flash. Flash is pretty annoying on this card. Whenever it or another vampire enters the battlefield under your control, exile the top card of each player's library with a collection counter on it. Once each turn, you may play a card from exile with a collection counter on it if it was exiled by an ability you controlled, and spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. So the reason that second ability is worded so weird is just so that it can see its previous selves. So if you cast this card and it dies and then you play it again, you can still play the old cards that have collection counters on it. And if for some reason your opponent is playing this card, then they won't get to play the cards that you have collection counters on. which is like a small corner case, but I guess it's there because that would be annoying to like try to figure out, should I cast the spell or wait till my opponent gets it and such. Anyway, all that said, this card is pretty cool. I think this card might just is a little bit too generic for my liking, because it just triggers on itself for some reason, and it also triggers on other vampires you control. I mean, this card is probably good enough where you don't even really need to play other vampires. But I think that's probably the most interesting thing that you can do with this card is just play like Vampire Tribal and not run, Mardu Idiot. Yeah, I think this effect is just too generic. You exile one from each player's deck is like, I mean, you essentially draw 4 cards, and then when you replay this card, it even sees the older versions of cards that you played. Or it can even play the older versions of itself, the exiled cards. I just don't like this card. I think this card's just too generically powerful. I mean, the 5 mana is like a real cost. So like the mana at least is like somewhat reasonable for this card, but I just don't like this card. I just think it's just like annoying. And like, yeah, it just gets you too much like right off the bat. And the fact that it has flash, you just flash it on your opponent's end step, so that way this thing doesn't die, and you can at least get one of the cards for sure off of it. And then if you have any like instants in there, then you can still play those during your opponent's turns and stuff. So yeah, I just think this card's bad design. It's not like obscene like Beamtown Bullies is, where like the cards in Magic just don't play well with it. This card's just generically, the card advantage it generates is just pretty annoying. And just, it's really hard to play against and play around this card. So for that reason, I think I'm going to level it at a D. Next up is not a D. It's a pretty sweet card. It's Falco, Sparrow, Packweaver. 1 green, white, blue for a 3/3 with flying and trample. It enters the battlefield with a shield counter on it. You look at the top card of your library at any time. You may cast spells from the top of your library by removing a counter from a creature you control in addition to paying its other costs. This is a very cool and fair future sight on a commander. And on a pretty reasonable threat, honestly. So the fact that it enters with a shield counter on it is pretty cool. It kind of helps protect itself. But if you don't have any other counters, you do have to spend that shield counter to cast cards from the top of your deck. Notably, this doesn't have, it's not full future sight. You cannot play lands with it, which is like a downside to it, but I think it's a good downside to have, because otherwise this card would be a bit obnoxious. But this card has enough restrictions and asks enough build around from you to make it a pretty cool card. I think I'm on A for this one for sure. Next up, Jetmir, Nexus of Rebels. 1 red, green, white for a 5/4 cat demon. Creatures you control get +1 if you have vigilance, and have vigilance if you have 3 or more creatures. Creatures you control get +1 and trample as long as you have control 6 or more creatures. Creatures you control get +1/+0 and have double strike as long as you get control 9 or more other creatures. So this card is like very good at doing the thing that it does, which is if you have a wide board, you will kill people. The vigilance on the first ability is actually no joke. I've played against this deck a few times now. A guy in our playgroup has this deck. And the vigilance is surprisingly useful. It allows you to like chip in with like mana dorks and stuff that you'll be playing. And then also your big idiots get a chip when they get in there, then they'll be able to still block for you so you don't leave yourself open. Because usually you want to turn your creatures with this effect sideways, but you don't have to turn them sideways now because they have vigilance. And then the trample and double strike is obviously crazy once you get to +2 and +3 power. You just straight up murder people. So this card is like very good at doing the thing that it does, which is, like I said, killing people with a wide board. But it doesn't help you do any of the other things that you need to do in Commander. You still need to ramp. You still need to draw cards. So that way when they wipe your board, you still can like refill it slowly and stuff. So I think this card's fine. It is quite annoying at how good it does the thing that it does. But the fact that it still has enough deficiencies, I think, lands it at a B for me. I'm going to put it like here. All right, we're coming up near the end here. So next up we have Ginny Faye, Jetmir second. So this is the Naya hybrid cycle. So this one's red, green, 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 white. For a 3/3. If you would create one or more tokens, you may instead create that many 2/2 green cat tokens with haste, or that many 3/1 green dog creature tokens with vigilance. There's a couple interesting things about this card. This card just says tokens, doesn't say creature tokens. So whenever you create like treasures or clues or foods or whatever, you can turn them into cats or dogs, which is pretty cool. But you have to create all of them. You can't pick and choose for like each one. So you have an effect that makes like 8 treasures. I can't choose to make like 4 of them cats and then 4 of them dogs, or like 4 of them cats and leave 4 of them as treasures. It's just all or nothing. But at least this is the may. You may do it, so you're not forced to do this effect, so it can't really hinder you in any way. The one thing I really hate about this card, and probably why I'm going to create a category and give it an F, is because they made the dogs significantly worse than the cats, which is just not true in real life. So for that reason, I'm just going to put it... I'm just kidding. Yeah, this card is, like, fine. It's got a cool build around. You know, it's, like, not powerful in any way. I think there's just barely enough to do with this card while I'm willing to give it a C, a high C. If it had a little bit more going on, like if both of the creature tokens were like viable creature tokens to make, then I would like say this is probably a B. But yeah, unfortunately the cats are just so much better than the dogs. Then like, you know, there's not really a flexibility here. The only flexibility is, do I want like my clues or do I want cats? Like there's the dog option here is just basically nothing. 3/1s with vigilance is just a very bad creature token compared to a 2/2 with haste. So for that reason, it's like I said, I'm gonna land at top of C. If the dogs were like 3/1s with trample, or like 3/3s generically, or 3/2s generically with like no ability, just, you know, something a little bit better. Vigilance is just not a good keyword to give to a 3/1, because like 3/1 dies to anything. So if I'm attacking with it, it's just gonna die. I'm not gonna be able to block with it, right? So yeah. Unfortunately, this card's just not quite flexible enough for me to land it in a B. But it is really cool. I like what it's doing. Next up, we have Lagrella, the Magpie. Green, white, blue for 2/3. When this enters the battlefield, exile any number of other target creatures controlled by different players until this leaves the battlefield. When an exiled card enters the battlefield under your control this way, you put 2 1/1 counters on it. This card's actually pretty cool. I really like this card. This card's like, doesn't give you a lot of build around. Like, there's not a lot of things to do with it. All it says is, hey, play creatures that you want to flicker. But that being said, we need more fair flicker commanders. Most of the flicker commanders we have are just really annoying. And this one is in the right colors for your flicker deck. Bant is where you want to be in your flicker deck. And it's just cool. It's pretty solid interaction for your opponents, while giving you a reasonable payoff for when they want to kill this thing, which they probably will, because they'll probably want their things back. So yeah, I like this card. I don't think it's like... There's not quite enough to do here for me to put it into an A range. But this card is pretty sweet. I like what it's doing. It's doing it in a very fair way. This card will not be miserable to play against, but you'll feel good playing it. It gives you enough to do. So yeah, this is another B for me. I'm pretty happy putting this at B. I'm going to put it like here, I think. Yeah, I'm going to move these two right here like this. I like this better. Next up, Lord Xander, the Collector. A lot of people are talking about this card. It's 4 blue, black, red, so 7 mana for a 6/6. When this enters the battlefield, target opponent discards half their cards, rounded down. When Lord Xander attacks, defending player mills half their library, rounded down. When Lord Xander dies, target opponent sacrifice half their non-land permanents they control, rounded down. So a couple things with this card. I don't think this card is very good. All of the different modes do very, very different things. 2 of them are annoying, and one of them can be like actively good for your opponent, that being mill. Like, if you attack a player and you mill half their library, like, you're probably actually going to generate them quite a bit of value. Most decks will have built-in recursion, especially from the graveyard. And it's like, the rounded down part on this card is the problem with this card. If this card was rounded up, this card would be significantly better on every mode. The rounding up will catch you an extra card a lot of times. Milling half their library matters for when you double it. It will actually kill them if they're at an odd number of cards in their deck. Dying, sacrificing half their non-land permanents rounded up will help you, get through some of their tokens that they might have lying around. Yeah, this card this card's just not very good. All the the modes on this card are annoying enough for your opponents to target the shit out of you, because they don't want these effects to happen to them. But the modes aren't like good enough to, help absolve that heat that you're gonna catch. And the payoff here is just not really worth it. Like, just being annoying to your opponents doesn't really help you kill them. Doesn't really help, facilitate a game plan for yourself. It's just being annoying is not really a good strategy. I think this card just lands in D for me. I'm kind of debating on putting it in C just because, this card, is not like bad design innately or anything. It's just kind of, I think I'm going to put it in D because you're not going to have good experiences playing against this card. Like, this card's not going to be fun to play against, but also like the person playing it just doesn't, realistically, there's not enough payoff to be playing this as your commander. The juice is definitely not worth the squeeze on this one for you. And then your opponents are also not going to have a good time. So yeah, this card's just a D for me. I just don't think it's a very good card. And yeah, you don't really get paid off for playing it. And your opponents are not going to enjoy playing against it. So yeah, there's just almost no upside for this card. Next up, Mr. Orfeo, the Boulder. 1 black, red, green for a 2/4. When you attack, double target creature's power until end of turn. Okay, so this card is when you attack. So it triggers immediately, even after this enters the battlefield, even if this isn't the thing attacking. So that's nice. Getting the effect right away is good. Doubling power is a cool effect. Notably, it doesn't double its stats altogether. So your creature that you're sending in is still very killable to blocks, probably. But this thing can definitely chunk your opponents if you got some fat idiot that's going to swing in with trample. So that's pretty nice. But overall, there's just not enough words on this card for it to be that interesting. It doesn't really point you in a very good direction. Just attacking with creatures that have high power and hopefully evasion is like, any deck can do that, right? Like, yeah, it's just not enough here. It gets a D in the similar way that Best does, not in the way that these other cards do, where they just kind of suck. I'm gonna kind of give me 1 second. I'm gonna kind of clump the cards that are I think are bad design together, and the cards that are just don't have enough to do. Yeah, like this. Okay. Next up, we got Ognis, the Dragon's Lash. This is part of the Jun's hybrid cycle. So this one's 1 black, red, 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 green. So 4 mana for a 3/3 with haste. Whenever a creature you control with haste attacks, create a tapped treasure token. Okay, so I hate this card because this card shows that they knew how to fix treasure by making them tap, so you can't use them right away. But they chose to only put it on a few cards in the set, and cards that were totally fine even if the treasure entered untapped. But if they just made all treasures enter tapped from now on, then treasures would be much more balanced. But for now, we have to deal with treasures being very good. Treasures aren't broken, FYI. I say FYI. In my opinion, treasures are not broken. But the fact that they just keep printing them and keep printing payoffs and treasures are just generically good in anything because every deck could use mana makes them kind of boring. But yeah, that doesn't mean treasures are OP or anything. Okay, all that out of the way. This card. What is there to do with this card? Not a lot. Haste Tribal is an interesting thing. And this triggers whenever a creature you control with haste attacks. So this triggers for all of your haste creatures. It's not just one. It's not just whenever you attack, if you attack with a haste creature, create a tap treasure token. It's not that. It does give you a tap treasure token for each creature you control that attacks with haste, including itself, which is nice. That all being said, tap treasure is like, a fine payoff. I guess if you've been looking for a haste tribal commander, then this is what you're gonna go to. It gives you the right colors to be in haste. It gives you red so you can get haste. Black and green so you can play like recursion and fat idiots. I think this card's like, there's not a lot to do with this card, but if you want to do the thing, it does the thing for you, and it does it fine. And it's balanced and everything, so it's just a C for me. I'm just gonna put it here. Next up, Quasar, Augur of Agonies. 1 white, blue, black for a 3/4. Whenever you draw a card, target opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. This card would probably be a pretty easy S if it made each of your opponents lose 1 life. For some stupid reason, they made it target opponent, which is just like, why? I just don't know why they did that. Because most of these effects usually say each opponent, like your, Psychosis Crawlers and whatever. But for whatever reason, this just says target opponent. And, like, if this was just each player, it would still be totally fine. And, like, yeah, I just don't know why they did target opponent. But, yeah, so the fact that it's target player, I think I'm just going to give it an A instead of an S. Because the build around for this card is, like, pretty, it's pretty open. But it's, like, pretty cool. Gives you Esper, which is a color combination that's typically likes drawing cards. And then you could play like life gain strategies or like wound reflection, and like there's a lot of cool things you could do with this card, but it gets inhibited quite a bit by the target player. That being said, it's still a really sweet card, so I think it's still an easy A for me. But man, this card is just messed up one word on this card. Damn it. Next up, Rafine, Scheming Seer. White, blue, black for a 1/4. Sphinx Demon, cool type. With flying and ward 1. Whenever you attack, target attacking creature connives X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. So very importantly, the reminder text here tells you what you do with connive X, which is you draw all of your cards and then you discard that many cards. You don't do one at a time. It's not draw, discard, draw, discard, draw, discard. It's draw 3, discard 3, which is a very important distinction. So you get all your information right up front, and you get to make the best decision that you can make, which is very important here. Because otherwise, if you just draw discarded one at a time here, then I think this card would be pretty bad. But the fact that you get all your information right away, and you can make the best decisions, makes this card pretty sweet. The ward 1 is like almost flavor text on this card, but I guess that's a thing. It slightly disincentivizes your opponents for killing this thing. Flying on this thing is nice, so this thing can get in there with your other creatures that you want to attack with. You also only get a connive on one thing, so it does actually, balance itself out by making you have to put your creatures at risk. Presumably, you'd play a bunch of flying men or invisible stalkers or, whatever, things that aren't going to die. So that way you can churn through your deck and like maybe play some sort of weird reanimator evasive creature deck. But like, yeah, this card is really cool. It's an Esper attacks. It also synergizes with discard strategy. So there's just a lot of things going here, a lot of directions you can go, none of them too like powerful or obscene. Yeah, this card seems like a pretty easy A to me. I like this card. I think this card's sweet. Almost done. Next up, we got Rigo, Streetwise Mentor. So this is the Bant hybrid one. This is green-white, white, or white-blue. So 3 mana for a 2/2. Rigo enters the battlefield with a shield counter on it. It's nice. When you attack a player or planeswalker with 1 or more creatures with power 1 or less, draw a card. So this card's pretty sweet. Notably, the 1 or less is very important on this card. It doesn't say power 1. It says 1 or less. So if you have 0 power creatures that you want to attack with, like Ornithopters and such, then you still get to draw the cards off of them, which is really sweet. Also, you can draw multiple cards off this. Whenever you attack a player or a planeswalker with 1 or more creatures, then you draw the card. So if you got 3 opponents, you each attack them with one of these. You get to draw 3 cards. If you attack 3 opponents and a Planeswalker one of those players controls, then you draw 4 cards. Because it says or Planeswalker, which is very important. So this card has a pretty cool build around. You want to play small idiots, but you also want to be able to like pump them post attacks so that way they become actual threats. Because you can draw a lot of cards off of this card by playing little dorks, but it's not going to help you kill your opponents unless you're just playing some boring combo, like just some 2-card combo. But like this card doesn't really tell you to do that, so I'm not going to dock this card for that. But yeah, this card's got a lot going for it. Also, the shield counter on itself is like protection for itself, but it's not annoying protection. It's still pretty easy to get around. Being a 3-mana 2/2 means this card's a pretty balanced stat line for the amount of card draw it can get you, and it requires a cool build around and points you in a like somewhat open but specific direction. So this card just hits all the marks of an A. I'm almost on S for this card. Yeah, I think I'm gonna give this card an S. I think this is great design. I think it's really cool. I like what they did with it. It's not gonna be miserable to play against. It doesn't really like promote a bad play experience of like you killing your opponents really fast with something really annoying. It's just honest value. But you can generate a lot of value. But you probably won't be threatening your opponents while you're doing it. Yeah, I think this card has everything going for it. This card's really cool design, really good card. Next up, Rocco, Cabaret Carrier. X, red, green, white for a 3/1. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you may search your library for a creature with mana value X or less, put it on the battlefield, and shuffle. This card you're probably going to see a decent amount more in decks than in the command zone. If you do see this in the command zone, I would be very wary because it means your opponent is probably up to no good. Because once you've cast this thing once from the command zone, paying the command tax and then having to pay X is like, that's a substantial cost if you want to get anything meaningful out of it. So if you're playing against this in the command zone, what your opponent probably wants to do is get 1 card to start a chain of combos. So like a birthing pod, splinter twin sort of combo. So yeah, I would be very wary of this card if you see it in the command zone. Now that being said, this card once again does not innately tell you to do that strategy, so I'm not going to dock this card because that's the strategy that it will use probably if it's in the command zone. But I do think this card's pretty cool. You're not cheating any mana costs here. You're getting a bad creature at a bad rate, but then you're paying the mana cost of another creature that you want to go get. So that's kind of your tax to go get the other thing. And it's when you cast it, so it's not like a reanimation flicker sort of target. So this card is on its face is a very balanced card, a very fine card. But just be wary of this card if it's actually in the command zone. This gets a C from me. Next up is a card that is super interesting to me. Toulouse, Clever Conductor. This is the Esper hybrid creature. So this is white, blue, or black, blue. So 3 mana total for a 3/1. When it enters the battlefield, it connives. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards, exile them from your graveyard. When Toulouse dies, you put the exiled cards into your hand. So there's a couple things here that I really like about the way this card's worded. So for one, you loot when this comes in, and the card that you discard will go under this, so presumably you can get that card back. So it draws you a card, but it's delayed, and you do get a little bit of selection at the same time. So that part's totally fair. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards, you exile them from your graveyard. So notably, the cards do hit your graveyard, which will trigger a lot of things that sometimes don't trigger with these sort of effects where you have to exile them instead and such. So I like that. You even though you don't get the option of not letting them get exiled, they do still hit your graveyard, which is really nice. Lastly, when Toulouse dies, you put the exiled cards into your graveyard from your hand. So this can be pretty insane card advantage if you build around it. If you can churn through and like loot tons of stuff consistently, But then it still has to die, so you still have to play around the fact that this could get bounced or exiled or something. So you'd still incentivize. It's still not like you're guaranteed to get these cards back. You still have to like work for it a little bit. There's just a lot that you can do with this card. The deck that I'm building is focused on cycling. You cycle a bunch of cards. Then like later when you need to draw more cards, you get all your cycling cards back, and then it's like you drew a card from those cards that you cycled, and not just replace the card with a different card. But you could also do a lot of madness stuff with this. This gives you a home for your blue madness cards, which is really cool. Typically, a lot of the madness commanders we've seen have been a red-black, but this one gives you blue-black, and then plus white, so you can play some other white cards and stuff to synergize with them. This card's just really clever design. I really like it. It seems very balanced. It does generate you card advantage, but it doesn't play the game for you or anything. The card advantage you do get from it is delayed, and you have to cash in your commander for it. So that command tax starts adding up. So you can't just keep doing this over and over again. And it still has some deck building restrictions. It's still asking you to ramp. And it's still asking you for you to find a way to kill your opponents. So yeah, I may be a little bit biased because I'm building to lose. But I think this card's another S. I think this card is just very balanced and open-ended, but still points you in a direction design. Yeah, I love everything about this card. I think it's very cool. Last one, Zytora the Incinerator, 3 black, red, green for a 6/6 dragon demon, pretty cool type. Flying. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice another creature. When you do, this creature deals damage equal to its power of the sacrificed creature's power to any target, and then you create 3 treasure. At first, I thought I was worried about this card being too generically powerful, but I was gonna build a cute like Jund Sacrifice where all my cards in the deck have the word sacrifice on them. But I think this card's just like fine. I don't think this card's like broken or insane or anything. This triggers immediately, so it's gonna basically pay for half of its cost by giving you 3 treasures out of the 6 mana that you spent to cast it. The creature that you sacrifice, you get to fling it, which is pretty cool. So if you just want treasures, you can sack some useless idiot, or if you have some cool synergy with the creature that you want to fling, like putting it into the graveyard or something, then you get a lot of damage. You still get your treasures, and then you put it in the graveyard. So it does incentivize you quite a bit to fling big creatures, but I presume most of the time you will just fling a small creature just to cash it in for some treasure. But I think this card is like fine design. I don't think it's busted that you get it right at your end step. And it's not like drawing you cards or anything, so it's not going to fuel itself. You do have to actually go down a creature to, create the treasure and get the effect. But most of the time, I presume you'll just sack some useless tokens like some Thrall or whatever, a creature you actually want to sack. So, but this being 6 mana, it's not like going to get turboed out or anything. And once the commander tax comes in and it's 8 mana, it's going to start adding up real quick. So your opponent does have limited uses of this card, and the card doesn't like win the game or anything by itself. So I think this card's just a B for me. I don't think it's as interesting as some of these other cards, but I think it's right about here. Okay, so that's my list. We ended up with a lot more Ds than I wanted, unfortunately. We have a mix of cards that suck and cards that, are, a little bit too pushed. So yeah, I mean, most of these are, just bad cards. But there are a few that unfortunately got to the pushed category, I think. Cs, yeah, most of the Cs are totally fine here. Outside of Kroos, the defense contractor, this card's just kind of almost D because it almost doesn't have enough to do for me to warrant, giving it a C. But all these other ones are at least interesting. Bs, I'm happy with the number of the Bs we had. We had the most Bs of any other category, so that's good. And then we ended up with, a good solid amount of A's and S's. So overall, outside of a few exceptions, I think this set's a win for Commander as far as the Commander's legendary creatures are concerned. Yeah, I think we got a lot of tools. We got shard support, which we've been very lacking for a while, so I'm very happy to see a lot more of that. And yeah, we even got some cool 2-color commanders and stuff too. So yeah, I really like the set, like what we've seen. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks y'all for watching. Y'all have a great day.